Shall I tell you another strange story today?
Yes.
The Nankai Trough is a subduction zone off the coast of Japan that is capable of producing very large earthquakes and associated tsunamis. The most recent large earthquake in this region was in 1946, which had a magnitude of 8.1 and resulted in widespread damage and loss of life. If a large earthquake were to occur in the Nankai Trough, it could potentially result in significant damage and loss of life. The shaking from the earthquake could cause buildings and other structures to collapse, and could trigger landslides and other types of ground failure. However, one of the most significant threats associated with a Nankai Trough earthquake is the potential for a large tsunami. When a subduction zone earthquake occurs, it can cause the seafloor to move up or down, displacing a large amount of water and generating a tsunami. In the case of a Nankai Trough earthquake, the resulting tsunami could be particularly devastating due to the high population density along the coast of Japan. To mitigate the potential impact of a Nankai Trough earthquake, Japan has implemented a variety of measures, including the construction of tsunami walls and evacuation plans for coastal communities. Additionally, ongoing research and monitoring of the subduction zone can help to better understand the potential risks and inform disaster preparedness efforts. In recent years, there has been increased research and monitoring of the Nankai Trough subduction zone in order to better understand the potential risks and prepare for a potential earthquake and tsunami. One example of this is the Nankai Trough Seismogenic Zone Experiment, Nankai Trough SEAS, which is a large-scale research project aimed at understanding the physical processes that lead to earthquakes and tsunamis in the Nankai Trough region. The project involves a wide range of international researchers and utilizes a variety of techniques, including drilling into the seafloor to collect geological samples and installing monitoring instruments to measure seismic activity and deformation of the Earth's crust. In addition to research efforts, Japan has also implemented various measures to prepare for a potential Nankai Trough earthquake and tsunami. This includes the construction of tsunami walls and other protective structures, as well as the development of evacuation plans for coastal communities. Emergency response drills are regularly conducted to ensure that people are prepared for a potential disaster. Despite these efforts, however, there is still significant risk associated with a Nankai Trough earthquake and tsunami. It is important for people living in the region to remain aware of the potential risks and to take appropriate precautions in order to minimize the potential impact of a disaster. In addition to the measures mentioned earlier, there are also ongoing efforts to improve early warning systems for earthquakes and tsunamis in Japan. The Japan Meteorological Agency, JMA, operates a nationwide earthquake early warning system that uses seismic data to quickly detect earthquakes and issue warnings to the public. The system can provide several seconds to a few minutes of warning, depending on the distance of the earthquake from the monitoring station and the size of the earthquake. Similarly, the JMA also operates a tsunami warning system that uses a combination of seafloor sensors and coastal tide gauges to detect tsunamis and issue warnings. The system can provide several minutes to several hours of warning, depending on the distance and size of the earthquake that triggered the tsunami. While these warning systems can provide critical time for people to evacuate and take other necessary precautions, it is important to note that they are not perfect and there is always some degree of uncertainty associated with earthquake and tsunami prediction. This is why ongoing research and monitoring efforts are so important in order to continue improving our understanding of these natural disasters and developing better ways to mitigate their potential impact. In addition to the earthquake and tsunami risks associated with the Nankai Trough subduction zone, there are also concerns about the potential for a nuclear disaster in the event of a major earthquake. Japan is home to several nuclear power plants located near the coast, and a large earthquake or tsunami could potentially damage these facilities and lead to a release of radioactive material. The most notable example of this occurred in 2011, when a massive earthquake and tsunami struck Japan and caused a nuclear disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The disaster resulted in widespread evacuations and environmental contamination, and highlighted the importance of disaster preparedness and risk mitigation measures for nuclear facilities. Since the Fukushima disaster, Japan has implemented various measures to improve the safety of nuclear power plants and reduce the risk of another nuclear disaster. This includes improving earthquake and tsunami preparedness measures, implementing stricter safety regulations, and developing new technologies to better monitor and control nuclear facilities. Despite these efforts, however, there is still concern about the potential for a nuclear disaster in the event of a large earthquake or tsunami in the Nankai Trough region. It is therefore important for ongoing research and monitoring efforts to continue in order to better understand and mitigate the potential risks associated with this subduction zone. Another potential impact of a Nankai Trough earthquake is the disruption of transportation and communication systems in the region. The Nankai Trough region is a highly populated and industrialized area, with major cities such as Osaka and Nagoya located nearby. A major earthquake and tsunami in the region could cause significant damage to transportation infrastructure, such as highways, railways, and ports, which would have a significant impact on the movement of people and goods in the region. Additionally, the disruption of communication systems could hinder rescue and relief efforts in the aftermath of a disaster. This is why it is important for emergency response agencies to have contingency plans in place for communicating and coordinating their efforts in the event of a major earthquake or tsunami. Overall, a Nankai Trough earthquake has the potential to cause significant damage and loss of life in the region. While ongoing research and preparedness efforts are important in order to minimize the impact of a disaster, it is also important for individuals and communities to remain aware of the potential risks and take necessary precautions to protect themselves and their families. In addition to the immediate impacts of a Nankai Trough earthquake, there are also long-term social and economic implications that would need to be considered. The reconstruction and recovery process following a major disaster can be a lengthy and complex process, particularly in a region as heavily populated and industrialized as the Nankai Trough. In the aftermath of a disaster, there may be significant challenges related to the provision of basic necessities such as food, water, and shelter for affected populations. There may also be disruptions to local economies and industries, particularly if transportation and communication systems are severely damaged. This can have a ripple effect on the national and even global economy, particularly if the impacted region is a major hub for trade and commerce. It is therefore important for disaster preparedness plans to take into account not only the immediate impacts of a disaster, but also the long-term social and economic implications. This includes identifying potential areas of vulnerability and developing strategies to mitigate these risks, as well as establishing effective communication and coordination channels between government agencies, emergency responders, and affected communities. While the potential impacts of a Nankai Trough earthquake are significant, ongoing research and preparedness efforts can help to minimize the impact of a disaster and ensure that affected communities are able to recover as quickly and efficiently as possible. One potential long-term impact of a Nankai Trough earthquake that is often overlooked is the psychological impact on affected communities. Disasters of this scale can be traumatic events for those who experience them, and may lead to a range of mental health issues such as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, and anxiety. It is therefore important for disaster preparedness plans to take into account the potential mental health impacts of a disaster, and to ensure that affected communities have access to appropriate support and resources in the aftermath of a disaster. This includes providing access to mental health professionals and counseling services, as well as working to address social and economic factors that may exacerbate mental health issues in affected communities. Overall, a Nankai Trough earthquake has the potential to cause significant and long-lasting impacts on affected communities. It is therefore important for ongoing research, preparedness, and response efforts to continue in order to minimize the impact of a disaster and ensure that affected communities are able to recover as quickly and effectively as possible.